Hey everybody, my name's Matt Homewood, also known as an urban harvester. Today we're going to be talking about food waste. The title of my talk is It's Garbage, How Supermarket Food Waste is Trashing the Climate. A little bit of background about me. I'm half French, half English. I studied zoology at Edinburgh University in Scotland before moving to Copenhagen to study climate change in 2015. Now today we're talking about urban harvesting. Many of you probably won't have heard of that phenomenon, but might be more familiar with the concept of dumpster diving. So this is dumpster diving. You literally go into the dumpster to have a look at what might be available in supermarket dumpsters. And it is quite astonishing, really. And this is a video that gives you a bit of idea.
Just my local dumpster. And what do I see? I see 6 huge slabs of meat that have come from Uruguay, on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. Look at this gold mine. We have got so much yogurt. We got avocados from Kenya. We got organic carrots. Got some salad.
So that gives you a good idea of what dumpster diving is about. And I'd never dumpster dived in my life until coming to Denmark. And I was introduced to it as a student because a lot of Danish friends do it or happen to do it at the time. And so the concept is pretty simple. Instead of going into the supermarkets I used to go to, now I was sneaking round the back and seeing what was available. So on the left, you had a whole dumpster full of blueberries. In the middle, pita bread to make plenty of falafel or kebabs or whatever you fancied. And then on the right hand side, we had Dominican Republic imported bananas, aubergines, red peppers, rye bread being the staple of Denmark, of course. And every single day, there was huge mountains of food waste going to waste in Copenhagen's dumpsters. And if you look on the right hand side here, the overview really gives you a good idea of some of the pristineness of that food. You look at the lemons coming in from Spain, the pineapples coming in from Costa Rica. Basically, more or less everything in the store, well, 1 to 5% of those items was ending up in the trash, I discovered. Chicken, pigs, cows, you name it, it was in the dumpster every single evening. It was truly shocking. I just couldn't believe how many animal products were ending up in the trash every single day. I mean, last time I checked, Denmark wasn't vegan, so this was a great surprise to me. And if you look closely on that photo, many of the products don't even have that yellow discount sticker on them. And so it got to a stage where I realized supermarket food waste in Copenhagen, at least, was completely out of control. So that's why in 2019, I set up this Instagram page called An Urban Harvester. I was actually anonymous for the first year. It was just an experiment, but because of the algorithms, I had to come out in anonymity because the posts weren't going and reaching as many people as they could have been had a person been in the post. But yeah, so that gives you a good idea. For an entire year, I was dumpster diving in the afternoon and the evening, bringing back food by bicycle because I couldn't drive. I just passed my license a couple months back. And I took photos of all this food. And so my living room turned into a photography studio. And the importance of this was to really show people that this wasn't food waste as our definition suggests, because when we say those words, we probably think of, you know, a few rotten apples, a few rotten oranges. People don't expect entire dumpsters of perfect food. And if you look closely, you've got baguettes and oranges and lemons and bananas and blueberries, dried chickpeas that wouldn't go off for years, cans of tuna at the top, cans of tomatoes, toothpaste, slippers from China, etc., etc. Entire boxes of food that weren't even making it out their boxes. 40 pizzas, 90 apple juices, 39 litres of ketchup, 44 litres of mayonnaises. Fruit and vegetables coming in from Southern Europe, 150 kilos of cow cream, 90 kilos of coffee bags without a single discount sticker on it, and then another pork harvest. And I quickly discovered that Denmark is one of the leading countries of pig production on the planet on a per person basis, because of course there are only 5.8 million people. But there are so many pigs produced here per year, between 30 and 35 million, depending on the year, that per person, Denmark produces 20 times more pigs than the USA, believe it or not. 60% of the Danish landmass is dedicated to agriculture. 80% of that is dedicated to grow livestock feed. So that means that 48% of the entirety of Denmark is used to grow food for livestock. And a portion of that is ending up tragically in supermarket dumpsters. And it's more complex than that, actually, because Denmark is such a small country in relation to how many animals they have. They also import a tremendous quantity of soybeans coming in from Brazil and Argentina. So much, in fact, that it's the EU's highest importer per capita. Eggs, 800. There were 2,000 in the dumpster, but because I do everything by bicycle, I could only bring back 800 in 3 shuttle runs. And from this point onwards, I focus much more on animal products, and that's because animal products are really quite inefficient to produce. Farm animals as a whole, including the feed, use 83% of global farmland, and yet only deliver 18% of human calories. And so from this point onwards, I focus that on animal production much more. And I have to say, bringing back the meat in the evening, of course that meant I couldn't take the photos until midday the next day, when it was light enough for me to use that natural daylight for my photography. And it meant that you know, the blood, the stench, it was horrific. And I'm only showing you one photo here. I've got, 4,000 on my computer. But it got to a stage where my vegetarian girlfriend, Pernilla, she almost kicked me out of the flat. It got so bad. And the day I'll never forget. 157 packets of bacon. Some of you might have heard this story. Many of you might have not. But anyway, so much bacon without a single discount sticker, if you look closely, that I took out my calculator. 16 kilos of bacon. And I worked out that that was bacon from 5 pigs worth. So at this point, I started to think, wow, if this is happening in Copenhagen, I really wonder what is happening across of the rest of Denmark. And the answer came to me from a lady who goes by the name of Dumpster Diving Diva. And she dumpster dives in Jutland, in the western part of this country. And this is just, your average retailer, Co-op Denmark. And it was shocking to see what she was finding. There were discount stickers, but were the discounts steep enough and quickly enough in relation to that best before date? Well, given how full that dumpster was, probably not. So the next question, of course, is if this is all happening in one of the most sustainable countries on the planet, well, what on earth is happening across the rest of this planet? So I reached out to my network. By this stage, there were some thousands of people following me on Instagram, and I was following hundreds of dumpster divers across the planet. So I put it out there. I said, folks, what are you seeing in your local supermarket dumpsters, wherever you're located on the planet? And I've received literally hundreds and hundreds of photos over these last 3 years. And so let's go on a global tour so that you can get an idea of what's happening across our planet. We start off in Australia. My friend Sophie, who's Danish actually, but she lives there. And yes, this is the Sydney suburbs. we've got some anonymous folks in Belgium. Many dumpster divers prefer to operate under anonymity because many countries have quite strict laws when it comes to waste, rather absurdly. And also tragically, really. But anyway, this gives you an idea from Brussels. This is Estonia. We've got Finland. Many dumpster divers are also scared about taking photography or videos at the dumpster for fear of prosecution, despite me trying to encourage them to take them because it's so much more impactful when we see those from the dumpster. But anyway, I respect their work. So anyway, here we got some cream and some feta cheese. Here, Germany, 500 million kilos, of supermarket food waste every single year in that country. It's one of the worst on the planet, and this person's kitchen is completely overwhelmed with supermarket food waste that's been salvaged. Here we've got New Zealand. The citrus fruits on the left are a classic, and on the right you've got plenty to choose from, including toothpaste. Norway, plenty of pork and beef going in the dumpster. This is Rema 1000, who are also operating and wasting in Denmark. We've got Poland, we've got the oranges, the pineapples from Costa Rica, and the melons from Spain. My friend Anna in Portugal. Sweden. And on the left-hand side, if you look closely, what's interesting is that we've got some beef and fish. And the beef actually, the minced beef, isn't even discounted with that 30%. And what's interesting here is that those responsible for that waste, ICA Gruppen, who are Sweden's leading retailer, they were being celebrated at the climate change conference last November, COP26, where I gave a talk. And I was surprised that they were being celebrated because I know that from Swedish dumpster divers on Instagram, their stores waste a tremendous amount of food. So I wondered how they achieved this. And the answer, of course, is carbon offsets. And so they've already achieved carbon neutrality. But what we need to ask ourselves in the green and progressive movement is, are these kind of practices acceptable to offset? Because in my eyes and many other people's eyes, this food could and should have been sold to the Swedish consumer had the price been right. The USA. You might be expecting this to be New York City, at Los Angeles, or another one of America's metropolises. You're wrong. This is Omaha, Nebraska, right in the heart of that country, a small town America, essentially. On the left, you've got plenty of beef and chicken and pork and turkey to choose from without a single discount sticker to choose from. And what's surprising is that the USA is actually one of the most progressive countries on the planet when it comes to legislation for charitable donations. It's called the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Food Donation Act. A bit of a mouthful, but it came into law in 1996. And basically it minimises liability for both the retailer and the non-profit, basically meaning that there's no excuse to not donate when you think of the remarkable tax breaks that retailers benefit from were they to do the right thing. But 26 years later, despite all the tax breaks, all the media coverage, and all the volunteers at the food banks, only 20% of all supermarket food waste in that country gets donated. 9.1 billion kilos of supermarket food waste every single year. And how much goes to landfill? 30%. You can see why I'm slightly skeptical of volunteer agreements. La France, baguettes and croissants in the dumpster. How dare they? France, 2016 was the year they introduced some of the most progressive legislation on the planet. It's not quite as progressive as we might have hoped, but basically it encourages charitable donations by giving a potential fine of €4,000 approximately to supermarkets 400 square meters in surface area or above. So basically it only covers large supermarkets And we see that enforcement is maybe lacking a little bit. Yeah, and so today there's still 1.6 billion kilos of supermarket food waste in France every year, despite that legislation. And finally, the UK, where I grew up. So of course, I'm biased, I'm interested. Supermarkets in the UK are actually a little bit more efficient than their European counterparts. On the right-hand side, we've got Tesco. This is a whistleblower who put this photo up on Twitter. Much of this food is going to charities, but still, only 9% of all supermarket food waste in the UK gets donated to charity, and that's despite 8 million people in the UK suffering from food insecurity. So you've got plenty of people struggling, and you've got plenty of food waste. But when we conflate these issues, we actually don't solve either problem. So why does food waste matter? Well, food waste matters because of the biodiversity crisis. The food system has a disproportionate impact on our planet. It uses about 50% of Earth's ice-free land. Agriculture today causes about 80% of global deforestation. Food waste from farm to fork is about 40%, unbelievably. So if we were to reduce that food waste by a substantial amount, you could have a massive impact on the biodiversity crisis in a positive fashion, of course. Food waste matters because of human hunger. Food waste on this scale, 40%, naturally impacts global food prices, basically pricing out those who can least afford it. 690 million people go hungry across the planet, according to the United Nations. 3 billion people can't afford a healthy diet. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres describes food waste as an ethical outrage, and I could not agree more with him, especially when you think about the food banks across the planet. Just like we went on a global tour on supermarket dumpsters across our planet, let's go on a quick tour of food banks during Corona crisis. Here we've got 6,000 people in San Antonio, Texas, waiting for food from their charity. Germany, 2020, France, Finland, and Australia, and so on and so forth. Food waste matters because of climate change. If food waste were a country, it'd be third, behind China and the USA. 10% of annual greenhouse gas emissions come from food waste. Project Drawdown, you can see the logo on the top right here. They are a climate change organisation in the USA, and their entire mission is to identify solutions to mitigate climate change. We've got two scenarios here, 1.5 degree warming by 2100 or 2 degrees. Considering there's already been 1.2 degrees warming since the start of the Industrial Revolution, the 2 degrees warming scenario is probably more likely, unfortunately. And here, remarkably, we see that reduced food waste comes in at number 1. And I think that really emphasises the remarkable magnitude of this issue across our planet, but that also represents a remarkable opportunity. So you might well be asking yourselves, so what are countries doing about it? Well, the answer, unfortunately, is very little. Out of all the countries who signed the Paris Agreement from 2015, unbelievably, only 6% of those Paris Agreement signatories have food waste goals in their national carbon plans. So we're really missing out on a massive opportunity here. So what can the United Nations do about this, for example? Well, the entire food waste universe comes in on the SDG 12.3. I've split up the definition into two. Number 1 is by 2030, we're going to halve per capita global food waste at the retail and consumer level. That's a good thing. We've got a goal, 50%, and a timeline. Fantastic. The second half of this definition is extremely problematic. Reduce food losses along production and supply chains, including post-harvest losses. So technically, if we were to reduce food waste by 1%, we'd have achieved our goals. it lacks ambition, it lacks focus, and it's not going to get us anywhere quickly considering the urgency of the social and environmental crises we face. So the UN also can do its part. But there are reasons for hope. I'm a proactive person. I can't just be slumbering in a pit of depression. So that's actually why I've joined a company here, for example, Throw No More, a Norwegian food waste app, because technology offers scale, and the private sector, of course, can offer massive efficiency were it to be uptaken across the supply chain from farm to fork. Literally, there are hundreds of companies out there trying to do its part, so I can't cover them all, but GS1 is an important one. It's a non-profit behind the global business standards. They're behind the barcode, for example, and they've got a new technology, the two-dimensional barcode, which offers great efficiency gains, but the uptake of that technology from the food system is far too slow. Our friends in Sweden, Delegate and Y-Waste, offer different solutions for supermarkets. Phoenix in France, they encourage charitable donations among other services. Wasteless offer dynamic pricing solutions. And Sugo is a online e-commerce platform that saves food from food manufacturers, for example, and sells them at a fraction of the price to Latin American consumers. Throw No More, you know all those yellow sticker labels in the store? Basically, we connect our IT systems and the stores, and so basically as the employee in the store prints that new label, that product is now live in the Throw No More app. So you as a consumer can see what's available nearby on offer before you head off home. So you can then decide to visit those stores and pick up all those bargains. It increases the likelihood of selling, essentially. But reasons for hope. We need more systemic solutions to really drive ways to solve this. A food waste tax. Our systems basically have to have the right incentives to make sure that behavior is optimal. A food waste tax basically would mean that the cost of wasting is increased, and so suddenly discounting items is more favorable in their cost-benefit analysis from the supermarket, for example. And it will probably encourage technological uptake because you do need to invest a little bit of money in some of these solutions. On the right-hand side here, we've got the food waste pyramid, and we have to respect it. The most optimal way of solving food waste is by reducing food waste. Then you get that food waste to people by charitable donations, then to livestock so that we keep this food and energy in the biological systems. Then we do biogas and composting. Biogas is not that optimal. 1 ton of tomatoes, the energy salvaged from that via biogas only recovers 1% of the total energy used to grow all those tomatoes in the first place. So we have to be very wary of some of these green solutions being pushed. And of course, landfill and incineration, no solutions at all, really. We need better food labeling. This is a big topic, but we need less complexity and more straightforwardness, especially for the consumer. And then legislation. Legislation, of course, is incredibly powerful when it's designed well. So for example, food waste from farm to fork, well, let's have robust baselines. When we set those goals for 2030, if the data isn't robust and accurate today, well, what's the 50% progress actually based on? So it has to be legitimate. And so for that, I believe we need third-party verification to ensure that that data is legitimate and accurate. And why not investigate legally binding reduction targets? Because then we've got some accountability in our system. And with that in mind, we've just released a campaign, a bordforslag from Målspil. Målspil skal kun betale sig. Excuse me for the poor Danish, but basically it says food waste shouldn't pay for itself. And right now we see it does. And so essentially this bordforslag isn't that ambitious, but it's a start. And basically we just want data for food waste being reported and then published in corporate reporting so that civil servants and journalists can establish where we are today and see how we're doing when we set those goals for the future. That's it from me today. A big thank you to Helle and UX Copenhagen Festival for inviting me today. I'm going to be joining you digitally to answer any questions you might have about food waste. I hope you found it interesting, and it's been an absolute pleasure to be here with you all today. So thank you very much, and I'll see you live in a second. Bye, folks.